Well, I'm going to start by saying a little bit about my work and how basically I arrived here, and the difficulty of actually, knowing what to make work about. As you know, there are a million things that one could possibly make work about. I started off actually doing life drawing at Bam Shaw School of Art, which is where I first did my first degree. And at that time, I was doing mostly figurative painting. And then I chose to, the work got really kind of political. So I started making work about perestroika in Russia. And my tutor came to my space and said, why are you making work about Russia? What's that got to do with you? You see, historically, identity discourse has basically advanced a lot, and the climate is rather different now. But at that time, there were just so many stereotypes about people that it wasn't so easy to cross over. There was an expectation that you would do a certain kind of thing if you're a certain kind of person. So, if you're a woman, there was a particular thing that you were expected to do. And as an artist of African origin, I was born in London, but I grew up in Nigeria, and then came back to London when I was 17. I also really didn't know which direction to go in, but I saw myself primarily as an international artist. And so when my tutor said, well, he then went on to say, well, why don't you produce authentic African art? And I couldn't quite figure out what authenticity was. What's authentic British art? Is it Morris dancing, or is it, but then thinking about the issue of authenticity, what is it? So I went to the market in Brixton, in London, and I bought some African textiles, and I was having a conversation about the textiles. Now, the textiles are Indonesian-influenced fabrics produced by the Dutch, and also produced in Manchester for sales to the African market. But what I like the metaphor of the fabrics, because on the one hand, they say Africa, or they've come to be known as African textiles. But then there are all the different kind of connections, kind of global trade routes, and also to do with kind of colonization. And so that's how the use of the fabrics started. The slides are kind of rather racing forward, unfortunately a bit faster than I would like, because I'd like to talk about specific works. But anyway, so the first paintings I did. So the first painting is a painting called Double Dutch, and it's So it's a painting called Double Dutch, and at that time, obviously, I was kind of, I've had the usual art history training, so I was thinking about a lot of the kind of abstract expressionists, but then the issue about abstract expressionism in the 70s, a lot of female artists and, gay artists also actually really started to challenge the predominance, if you like, of this kind of male, egocentric kind of, huge paintings in modern art galleries. So, and of course, going through art history from, people like Judy Chicago in the United States, a lot of the happenings, people like Nancy Sparrow. And so I was then looking around me and trying to figure out actually what were other artists doing and how do other artists actually try to fit into the kind of mainstream. And then I realized I wasn't actually going to do large abstract expressionist paintings because physically, I would just find that difficult. But at the same time, I decided that what I would do would be to fragment, if you like, fragment high art by actually bringing in, something from the market. So there are elements of kind of pop art where you take something that's, fabricated in the factory, and also kind of painting in a very kind of tactile way. So I would then alternate between the front and the center. And when I was actually training as a, life painter, I was kind of told not to use black, not to use vulgar colors. So in a sense, this is my own little kind of, rebellion within the studio. So can we go to the next one? And so my practice, taking the fabric as a kind of a starting point, my practice then expanded out. So this is a piece called Sun, Sea, and Sand. Come back.
Yeah, you're not. I can do
Well, when I was making a lot of these pieces, we had things called slides. And slides were very reliable. At least you knew what you had, and none of this kind of digital stuff. Well, slides didn't do that. Actually, do you guys know what slides are? I don't know. Do they still make those? No. Yeah. All right, so while he's doing that, but anyway, I'll just keep talking you through things while we're trying to get that sorted out. So the practice kind of started to expand into different areas. Okay, so is it going to be all right now? Okay, so this is a piece called Sun, Sea, and Sand. And this came from, I think I was just kind of watching the news. You will hear a lot of sort of anecdotal stuff, because I actually just want you to understand. Of course, I did do all the kind of, all the sort of theory and the deconstructions and what have you. But at the same time, there are, I think my work kind of does tend to come from a kind of visceral place, like it just comes from things that actually happen. So kind of inspired by political, everyday stuff, actually. And then I try to take that onto, that's not to say that the work is necessarily illustrating theory or illustrating politics. The theory does underpin the practice, but it's not necessarily an illustration of all those things. I mean, for example, this piece here, you know, this really just came from a news item about starving in Ethiopia, I think it was, and then there was an advert about that, about safari holidays, and then I was actually just thinking, oh well, you know, the kind of idealism of this kind of sun, sea, and sand, but then the flip side of that, a kind of, I mean, literally kind of empty bowls or kind of poverty, but at the same time, saying it, how I managed to get to a piece is not necessarily related to the end product, you know, so I'm not really trying to kind of be literal. Okay, so can we go to the next? And so, as part of the installation, this is a piece called Victorian Philanthropist, Parlour. And again, this is the point at which a lot of kind of Victoriana came into the work. And this actually happened as a result of, this was a time when the Conservative government was in power. And Margaret Thatcher at that time was talking about Victorian values. And I was trying to figure out what that actually meant to me, or what's my own relationship to Victorian values. As an artist of African origin, Victoriana for me says, you know, imperialism, colonization, and so rather than actually having a fear of Victoriana, I decided to actually parody the idea. So there's a kind of a flirtation with the whole Victorian costumes, and then at the time, I used to go to the Victoria and Albert Museum, and so I then decided, why not actually do what I now describe as ethnicizing the aristocracy? So it's a way of just having fun. You know, the thing that you're meant to be wary of, or you know, be fearful of, if you like, which might be power. One way of working with it is to try to subvert some of that in my work. So when you go to the next. No, just only move when I say so. Okay, so so this is another painting called Deep Blue. So the way that my practice works, I do a lot of things simultaneously. So there are times when I'm working on location, but I like the kind of tactile stuff of actually making the paintings. So I'm doing paintings, I'm doing drawings. Okay, can we go to the next one? And then this is just a piece called Cha-Cha-Cha. I just like the kind of seductiveness, or the kind of, you know, fetish nature of the kind of shoes. That's not to say that I've got some kind of, you know, secret secret into shoes. So, and this is a piece called Alien Obsessive, Mom, Dad, and the Kids. So some of these pieces, you know, seem very, if you like, kind of playful. I mean, on the one hand, they're actually quite playful, but they are also about quite serious subjects. You know, you might actually look at those works and then you might think, well, actually, you know, what's that work? What's it got to do with the Holocaust? And you might think, well, actually, those two, they kind of seem extreme to be talking about the Holocaust when you're talking about this kind of work. But actually, when you do think, the genocide and a lot of kind of political disasters actually begin from a point of ignorance. And those things also begin from stereotyping people. So, I mean, although those issues are actually extremely serious, I think that that's, in a sense, that's kind of where my work comes from. It's actually trying to understand the nature of my own identity and the history of that identity, and then how to, in a kind of a playful way, challenge some of those things. But equally, though, and I must emphasize this, although my work is, although the work is actually political, it's not necessarily politics. It's not. I'm not a politician in that sense. So, but it's work that actually does deal with a lot of those issues. Can we go to the next one? So, and I guess what I always say is that the work is really not politics, but it's about the politics of representation. Because there was a time when I was actually really kind of looking at semiotics and the study of signs. So it's about what the signifiers are doing and kind of interrogating that. And this painting by Gainsborough is at the National Gallery, and it's called Mr. and Mrs. Andrews. And you can see a kind of nouveau-riche couple, I suppose, outside of their estate. And so what I've done here is say, Mr. and Mrs. Andrews without their heads. So again, some of my sculptures have, they're headless. And that started actually as a joke about the French Revolution, where, I started to kind of take their heads off. Okay, so can we go to the next one? And this project I actually did for the London Underground, and there were kind of huge posters as you went down to the London Underground. My goodness, that was quite a while back. I'm looking at that date and I'm thinking, really? That was 1998. So this is a project in which, with some actors, we all kind of dressed up and hung out in this amazing home for 3 days, and we made the work while we were there. So it's a day in the life of a Victorian dandy. Okay, so can we go to the next one? So this is, so the dandy goes to his, goes to his study. And I think this is the image that was actually used throughout the underground on about 40 stations. Well, that was long before. I mean, I think you're used to a lot of art on the underground now, but at that time, that wasn't actually being done at all. So, because I remember being surprised actually to have actually got permission to do it. Okay, so can we go to and at the time, it felt like something really, really new and radical, but I think it's more or less commonplace now to put things on the underground. Okay, so can we go? Yeah. Okay, I'll tell you when I need to. No, I'll just do it when I tell you. Okay, so there is. No, it's fine. Okay, so there is Fragonard, the swing by Fragonard. And this is, if you look closely at the dress she's wearing, it's got this kind of Chanel print, which I found in the shop. And there's a funny story about that, because when I did, this installation was at the Turner Prize at the Tate for my nomination. And when I went back into the shop, I was told that Chanel wasn't actually very happy, so they went to the shop to basically warn them, because the people who made the fabrics didn't really seek permission from Chanel. But the interesting thing about that was that Chanel didn't actually approach me directly. So because as an artist, I just basically used the found material. But so that kind of, I guess, there are kind of copyright issues there. But I didn't reprint, I didn't reprint it, so, can we go to the next one? Okay, and then at one time I was very interested in the writings of Oscar Wilde, and this is, I did a series based on the picture of Dorian Gray. And, okay, so can we go to the next one? And so the basic story, really, it's about a Victorian dandy, a very vain Victorian dandy, who he made a wish to stay young, but then over time, an artist painted his portrait, and then the painting just was in the attic, and the painting kind of got. The younger he got, the more grotesque the painting got, and as he was also a bit of a rascal, shall we say? So it did a number of bad things, and so over time, he kind of, he didn't grow old, but then he decided to commit suicide in the end, to kill himself. So when he killed himself, the painting. Got even kind of worse. But, in a nutshell. But can we go to the next one? So this is me kind of, playing. But for me, really, this project is about, I was really thinking about the idea of the body and mortality when I did this project. And of course, as you know, within kind of society now, there's a kind of obsession with the body and plastic surgery and body image and all that. Can we go to the next one? This is, you won't believe it, this is just in East London, Victoria Park. It looks more glamorous than that. Okay, can we get to the next one? Yeah, so Dorian Gray kills the artist who painted the picture. Next one. So he kind of contemplates his own image before he killed himself. Okay, next one. Okay, and then the next one. Okay, stop that, yeah. So, one aspect of my practice as well, there's the kind of theatricality and the idea of masquerade and acting as well. That's one aspect of the practice I really enjoy, because I can, transform myself into something else or be part of something or create a kind of stage. So there's that, because throughout my practice, there are aspects of kind of theater, painting, photography, film, and, happenings or whatever. So, okay, so that's a piece I did in collaboration with the Fabric Workshop in Philadelphia. It's called Space Walk. Can go to the next. They printed all of the fabrics, and this was shown at Basel Art Fair a while back. Okay. And then this is a piece that was done for Documenta. I was actually, at the time, I was reading something about the Grand Tour when the aristocracy, went to places like, Venice. And I was reading a few kind of naughty books about that period, because actually people who couldn't express their own sexuality at home would go on those grand tours, and they would, do things that they wouldn't necessarily do in England, rather like those holidays that people kind of went on. So can we go to the next one? I mean, a lot of the contemporary issues that we think about now, and of course, about the kind of, Occupy Wall Street, Occupy, and also, all the issues about, the earnings of bankers and so on. I'm very interested in the idea of subverting something that you desire. So, on the one hand, I may actually be critical, and we'll come to, and this does link in to why I actually insist on using the MBE after my name. It's about parody, and it's about desiring something that you criticize. So on the one hand, I may want to critique or challenge the establishment, but at the same time, I also want the trappings of establishment. So there was a surprising thing for me, because I would probably consider myself a bit of a rebel, but when I was invited to the palace to receive my MBE, I had my Republican credibility before that period, and I would still like to think I do. I very much challenge establishment, but to my surprise, I found myself actually enjoying the moment of the fact of actually being in the palace. So the irony of that is that the thing that I actually challenge or I hate, I also have this kind of love-hate relationship. So the guys who do the revolution also actually, at the end of the day, they want some power as well. And so there's this kind of double-edged thing. Okay, so can we go to the... Okay, and the next one. Okay, yes, so this is also kind of part of that show. But I won't explain this one, so... I would imagine it's self-explanatory, yeah? Just when I say so. Okay, so the next one. So this is like in one, I guess, big installation. Okay, the next one. Okay, and the next one. And then this is the first film I worked on. This is basically a ball. I did a residency in Sweden, and it's about there was a Swedish king called Gustav III. This actually happened at the time of the Iraq War, and he was fighting wars in Russia while his people at home were kind of starving. So there was a conspiracy to murder him at the ball. So I found out more. So what I do tend to do with some of my work as well is I take historical events or historical parallels, and then I make work out of that. So, okay, can we go to the next? And then I changed the gender of the killer in the film. And the film is, it's a shame I haven't got a clip here to show you, but it's silent, but all you can hear is just the footsteps of the dancers and the breathing as well. Okay, next one. Okay, and the next one. Okay, and the next one. And so with this project, I worked with Swedish television. And so it's the first time I've ever, because I've got my own team in London. I've got my own costumiers and all those people. But in Sweden, I just went there and I advertised for everything while I was there. And that was a real kind of challenge for me to go to a new place and actually find everyone and work with people I've never actually worked with before. And it was a very it was a very exciting project. I mean, I loved doing that project very much. Okay, so next one. And then this is a collaboration I did with the Royal Opera House, just like a small ballet film that was shown at Trafalgar Square and also outside the Opera House in the interval of the opera. And it's based on Swan Lake, and it's basically a white ballerina and a black ballerina dancing opposite each other with a kind of hollow frame in between. It looks like a kind of mirror. Okay. And it takes a while to actually figure out that it's not a mirror. That's just two different people. Yeah. And they, I mean, what I really like about this project is that they kind of synchronize each other perfectly, you know, the movements. But one dancer is doing the opposite. But and then there was a choreographer as well I worked with. So actually, when those projects are being made, I'm also learning about different areas of, you know, theater, dance as well at the same time. Okay. Next. And then this is a piece called Black Gold. And it's based on, I guess, you know, thinking about oil and the kind of problems of oil, particularly also in Nigeria and all over the world as well. But it's kind of like a playful kind of splat on the wall. But it's, and that was installed at Stephen Friedman Gallery. Okay. So that's the detail there. No. Yeah, you go when I say yeah. Now this is part of the show at Stephen Friedman Gallery. The figures, the guys, a piece called How to Blow Up Two Heads at Once. Yeah, get to the next one. Yeah, the next one. Okay, and that's just a piece called Flower Cloud. It's a ballerina balanced on a mushroom cloud. Okay, next one. And then I figure, you know, girls fight too, right? So it's not just guys. So that's the female version. So how to blow up two heads at once. Ladies, yeah. But I also, you know, I mean, I truly enjoy working with kind of costumes and stuff. So, I mean, there's you know, there's a combination of kind of seriousness and fun as well. Okay, so the next one. Okay, yeah, and the next. Yeah, so this is just a kind of a flower piece that was in that show. There was a time when every time I switched on the news, there was just so much, like, you know, war on all the time. So I decided, you know, let's just make some flowers, man. So I did. Yeah. And then I do these little paintings called toy paintings. And they have kind of toys attached to them. And again, you can tell that it was also at the time of the war that I did this, with all the airplanes attached to the top there. Okay, next one. It was actually, yeah, the same period of time I was invited by the Haywood Gallery to, there's a flag masts just by the London Eye, to put a flag up there. And so that was the first time I actually decided not to use my own fabric, and to just have a white flag, but have it half-mast. So that's what I did. Okay, next one. Okay, the next one. And then the next one. Okay, next. And then I was invited to do a project. I mean, I don't know if some of you saw this project, but I repeated the project in London because I was invited to do this project in Paris, and I created a labyrinth, really, and I put kind of lovers all around it. And it's a project called, Jardin d'Amour, Garden of Love, and they're based on lovers from Fragonard paintings. And so this is the first one. Okay, the next one. And you have to actually, because they're not so easy to actually photograph in the maze. So, but you have to look for them, and you run into dead ends. And so that's very much about you in the space, looking for the works. Okay. Okay, and then the next one. And then this is a project that was done at the National Gallery. And in the National Gallery, there were two portraits of two people who'd been very much involved in the slave trade. And when I was invited, I had the portraits removed, and then I put in works of the two people shooting this pheasant that's kind of above your head. If we go to the next. And at the National Gallery at the time, some of the board members refused to actually come to the opening, and because they felt very strongly that the National Gallery is not a place for kind of contemporary artists, that, because I wasn't actually showing in a separate section for contemporary artists. I was really in the space, in the actual, because they do have a section where they show contemporary art, but I wasn't there. Okay, so. Yeah, so this is kind of more or less what the installation. So above your head, the kind of exploded, bloody pheasant was like. Okay. And then I made some works based on Goya's etching, The Sleep of Reason Produces Monsters. At that time, this series actually came out of a speech that George Bush made about the axis of evil, and so, and then I was thinking about, irrational fear of various types of people. Okay, so can we go? And so each person in each photograph represents a different part of the continent, different parts of the world. And all of the animals were constructed as well by my studio. Okay, next. Okay, next one. And then the next one. And so, again, there are kind of different crafts. sort of involved in, in the studio, which, I can go through that with you a bit later, how things really work. Okay, good. Next. Okay, go to the next one. Okay, okay, next one. This is a project I did in Miami, I think Miami Art Museum, where I was invited to do work in an area that's very much an immigrant community. And so I was actually thinking about the freedom to actually, fly or to go. So they're kind of fantastical flying machines, I guess. Okay, the next. Okay, and the next one. Okay, go to the next. Yeah, and then with the issue of kind of global warming, I've been doing this little kind of, I've been calling them globe children. They're just precariously balanced kids on this warming globe. And the kids kind of defy gravity. Okay, go to the next one. Okay. And then just some works on paper that I do, kind of collages with cutouts and so on. Okay. Okay, good. Next one. And so this, you guys are probably familiar with. And if you haven't seen it, you have to go and see it now. No, I'm just joking. This is actually one of the most scary things I've ever done, because when I was invited to do this, I couldn't really, Trafalgar Square, it's such a huge thing, and if you were to fail there, it would be such a huge public humiliation. So I was actually quite scared. And then what actually, I'd been told that other artists have been, had been invited into the competition, but I didn't know who they were until the last minute. And then when I saw the names on the list, my jaw just dropped, because this is my first ever kind of public project, and I'd never done any, and I saw artists who'd done quite a number on the list. So I guess I would say that one scared the shit out of me. Yeah. But anyway, got it done, and it's, it's there. But the great thing about that is, as a result of doing this project, I've now been invited to do many more. So, that's just the way it goes. Like, you do your first public thing. And, at least people can see that, you can do it. Then you get opportunities to do more. Okay, so go to the next one. And so, actually, I have to tell you what it's about. I forgot. This is, because Nelson's column is in Trafalgar Square. And so it just seems obvious, really. Nelson fought the battle against Napoleon, and it was a battle to have control of the seas. And so when Britain actually won control of the seas, obviously, imperial ambitions, were kind of better fulfilled, and the French kind of lost that battle. And the place where it happened, it happened in Trafalgar, so that's why it's called Trafalgar Square. And the ship that Nelson was in is called HMS Victory. So it's that ship that's in the bottle with African textiles as sails. Okay, go to the next one. And this is this is the competition maquette. So that's the one what won it, that maquette. Yeah. Okay, so can we go to the next one? Oh, what's that? Oh, right, okay. Go to the next. Okay, this is just some kites I put up in Basel. Basel. Okay. Okay, so this is my next London public project, I suppose. This is near Phillips the Pury, just opposite. And so it's a new series I'm doing, and they're called wind sculptures. They're about, I guess, 5 meters high, and they're fiberglass, and they're kind of painted. So they're like fabrics just kind of blowing in the wind, but giant fabrics blowing in the wind. And so it's my new series of public sculpture. Okay, so go for it. Yeah, so just go for it. Okay. And are we near the end? Okay, so just quickly talk about guest projects. Guest projects is, happens in my space, and my studio is upstairs, and guest projects is downstairs. So it's a project space where there's a box outside my studio, and artists, once a year, I invite people to submit proposals. And I select with other artists 3 proposals, but they have to be like a group show, and yeah, so and a lot of things happen, performances, screenings and so on. And so those images are just kind of, my studio is along the canal near Broadway Market in East London, and so that's just after during one of the private views. And is there another one? Okay, so that's all I've got to say. Thanks. So if you've got any questions. Yes.
I'm wondering about the moment when the content or subject matter choice becomes style. For example, the fabric, if you start to use it as a subject, as something to show a particular subject matter. And then you have to use it at the point that it becomes style and becomes another subject matter, or later on the costumes and the way people dress. I was wondering how do you deal with this repetition? How do you
I mean, the way I see that is, I see my entire practice as a book with chapters, right? And then there's a link from one chapter to another. So basically, I've developed, I see my work very much as a conversation with an audience. So there's a kind of a language that I started to use to make this conversation. So when they go to my next work, it's a continuation of that conversation. I don't know if you know what I mean, but so they understand that, okay, we know this person, and we're following him and having a conversation. So there are certain signs. So I guess the fabric is a kind of it's the continuation of that conversation. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Can I ask you about the semiotics? You said that you were researching semiotics
Yes.
before you did the headless one from the Gallantry. Was it Mrs. Andrews?
Yeah, no, no. Okay, so when we say semiotics, I don't want to be obscure. So basically, what I mean really, and that relates particularly to the fabric. So semiotics is basically the study of signs, and so it's basically looking at the way that we represent something, right, and the social, the social significance of that. So basically, okay, a good example to separate signifiers and signifieds is if you take, I don't know if you know that image by Magritte, where it says it's a painting of a pipe, but underneath it says this is not a pipe, right? So now you can separate signifiers from the signified because the picture of a pipe is not a pipe. Are you following me?
Yeah, I'm supposed to be in relation to that image as well.
No, but yeah, you see, okay, so basically, from my point of view, it relates to not particularly the image, but it relates to the costume, yeah? So so basically the costume is, it's almost like trying to deconstruct an 18th century costume in the image, yeah? So that costume the fabric has been switched to another. So what it represents as normal European aristocratic costume is problematized by switching that representation, the sign, through the use of the fabric. Does that make any sense? Yeah. So it's about, so in a way, but I don't like to talk theory very much because it sounds unrelated to reality, right? But it's actually, but basically what I'm doing really is basically interrogating meaning. What is, and one way of saying that in a very straightforward way is just basically challenging stereotypes would be a more lucid way of expressing that. Yeah.
Could you say a little bit more about the white cloud piece? Because that does seem to really jump out at that point when you chose very deliberately to leave your material identity and things that people have been used to seeing in relation to you. And the language seems to shift a bit. I just wonder whether you could say something more about that particular piece.
Yeah, no, I mean, that piece was more like an homage, if you like, to all of the people who were kind of dying during the Iraq War on both sides, because then no sign is put up as representing anyone. It's a blank canvas. But also the flag, when you put it at half-mast, you're usually doing it to mourn something. So it's about loss. It's about, the taking away of the pattern, the taking away of the representation, because actually all of the horror that was coming out of Iraq wasn't necessarily frontline news, but thousands of people were dying there. And also, American soldiers and all, So that was my way of kind of not wanting to, it's a removal, if you like, the whiteness, it's a removal of ideology or any kind of ideology. It's a kind of a blankness. Yeah.
Does it feel different from you, that one, or not? Was it?
Well, it's a piece of mine that not many people know about. It's not usual. It's almost like saying, actually, out of respect for this loss, I will actually not do, because I'm sure when I was invited, they probably imagined that I would put in some colorful flag up there. But at that time, it didn't feel appropriate to just come in and do my usual thing. Yeah. Yes.
Earlier you spoke about the expectations of your work as a student, and you spoke about that kind of identity politics. Being a student with, having one foot in Africa and one foot here in the UK. And I wonder whether you think that politics has changed much internationally. Whether you think it's easier for African artists or artists of African origin to practice internationally without those kind of expectations?
I think it's changed enormously. Because I think when I was a student, I think that, because now, I don't think it's a big deal to talk about contemporary African art or, there are many examples, there are many names that you can kind of mention, quite successful artists globally in the market as well. There are a number of successful, African artists globally. At that time, I mean, there were kind of few. Well, I mean, there were few successful English European artists anyway. Like, not many. The art world has expanded so much that also on the international scale, and I think that I would most certainly say that it's easier today than it was then. I mean, even for British artists, it's far easier now to make a living than it was. Not just making a living, but just getting the recognition. So, yes, no, I think this scene is a much more global one. That everyone has there's no longer a sort of Euro-American dominance on contemporary art. It's not, it's very much global now. I would say, and of course, you're probably aware of Documenta that was curated by Okwi and Wezo, somebody of African origin. And also, I think that well, first of all, it was actually not just Documenta. There was a show called Magicien de la Terre in Paris. I don't know if you're aware of that exhibition, but that was the exhibition. I would say that Magicien de la Terre was the turning point in actually globalizing contemporary art practice. It was the first time that artists of other regions were put into kind of global kind of prominence. Yeah, so I think from that point on, I think there was a kind of, definitely there was a shift. Yeah. Okay, yeah.